Hello again. We're going to continue reading Andrew Clements' The Losers Club. We're on page 17, chapter 4, Rules. Alec got to the gym at exactly 6 minutes after 3. He checked in at the table by the door, then walked halfway down the west wall of the huge room, flopped onto a pile of exercise mats behind the bleachers, and opened up the hiking again. Almost 20 minutes later, a voice interrupted the story again. "Excuse me, you're Alex, right?" He said it quickly. "Yes, Alex Spencer." It was the woman who had taken his name at the door, looking down at him through narrow glasses with brown plastic frames. She had short blonde hair and small gold earrings shaped like cats. A dangly bracelet hung from the wrist of the same hand that had rings on it, and Alec couldn't help noticing that the fingers were long and thin, finished off with bright red nail polish, which immediately made him remember the warden in the book Holes, the lady who ran a boys' prison camp out in the desert. She said, "Did you get the student information booklet about extended day, about your program choices?" "Yes," he said. "It's at home, except I didn't get a chance to look at it." The woman said, "I see. Well, I'm Mrs. Case, the program director, and you have 3 different options. You can sign up for the active games program or the clubs program, or you can report to the homework room each afternoon." Mrs. Case tried to smile as she talked to him, but Alec could tell she was annoyed that he hadn't known all this beforehand. "So, those are your choices," she said. Alec said, "But can't I just sit here and read?" Mrs. Case shook her head. "You need to be enrolled in one of the 3 activities I mentioned: clubs, games, or homework. Now, if that book is a school assignment, then you should be in room 407, the homework room." Alex said, "This book? It's just for fun, and I've already read it 4 times. He smiled, but Mrs. Case didn't smile back. She looked over the top of her glasses at him. "But you do have homework, don't you?" He nodded. "Oh, yeah. Tons. So you could go to the homework room and work on that." "Well," he said slowly, "I could, but I'm going to do all that later at home because it's homework. Get it?" Alec was still smiling, and Mrs. Case still wasn't. "As it also explains in your information booklet, students have these first 2 days to decide which of the 3 activities to start out with. If you don't want to be in the homework room, you could ask Mr. Jensen or his assistants about active games. Or you could talk to Mr. Wilner. He's in charge of the clubs program, and he can tell you all about it." Mrs. Case looked at Alec for a moment and then gave him a real smile. "The games can be a lot of fun, and if you don't see a club you like, you could always start one of your own. Extended day is actually a great place to spend time with kids you might never get to know during the regular school year. But whatever you do choose to do, you can't just lie down here on the gym mats by yourself, all right? So have a nice afternoon, and if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them." And with that, Mrs. Case turned and walked back toward her command center at the main door of the gym. She was wearing a dark blue pantsuit, which made her look sort of like a police officer, except she also wore orange and white running shoes, which was not like a police officer. Alec noticed the shoes because they squeaked on the shiny wooden floor. The big clock above the main door was inside a heavy wire cage to protect it from stray basketballs, and he could see that it was almost 3:30. In the corner off to the right of the doorway, it looked like a game of kickball was starting up, but Alec didn't want to play active games for the next 2.5 hours. He'd gotten plenty of exercise hurrying from class to class all day, so he tucked his book into his backpack and headed down toward where the club's area. 5 cafeteria tables had been set up along the rear wall, each about 15 feet from the next, and a tall man wearing a blue sweater was helping some kids unload plastic bins from a storage closet in the corner. There was a small hand-lettered sign on each table: Chess Club, Robotics Club, Chinese Club, Lego Club, and Origami Club. Alec didn't really want to be in a club either, and he really didn't want to start one. To have to get an activity organized and then keep it going day after day? That sounded horrible, because right now, today, all he wanted to do was read. Alec glanced back to see if Mrs. Case was watching him. She wasn't, so he hurried toward the table with the most kids, which was the Lego Club, 3 boys and 3 girls. The tallest boy was lifting trays of Lego parts out of a large bin and handing them to the other kids. Alec didn't know any of them. He was pretty sure they were all fifth graders. When he reached the table, he smiled at everyone and said, "Mind if I sit here and read? I won't bother anybody." The tall boy shrugged and said, "No problem," and most of the other kids nodded. Then one of the girls said, "But if you want to join the club, you have to get on Mr. Wilner's list." "Right, I'll remember that." Alec glanced across the gym once more to check on Mrs. Case. All clear. He quickly moved round to the back side of the table, slid onto the seat across from the big plastic bin, and hunched down behind it, nicely hidden. Then he took out the High King and started to read once more. The story lifted him up and carried him away, just like it always did, and he forgot all about the squeak, squeak, squeak of Mrs. Case's running shoes. Even though he knew this book as well as he knew his own backyard, he still loved every character, still loved every twist and turn of the plot. And after a day like this one, it felt amazingly wonderful to know exactly what was going to happen next. Chapter 5, Simple. It was still the first day of school, still the same never-ending Tuesday afternoon. At around 5:15, Alec felt a tap on his shoulder. He shrugged away the touch and kept reading, furiously munching the last bit of Luke's granola bar. Taran, his favorite character in the High King, was about to be rescued, and then came the battle and another tap. "Sorry to interrupt," said a voice, "but I need to talk to you." Alec pulled his eyes away from the back page and looked up, and then looked up further. It was the tall man, Mr. Wilner, the one in charge of clubs. "Oh, hi," Alec said. "Sorry. Could you step over this way?" The man pointed toward a small table next to the storage closet. Alec got up from the Lego table and followed him, looking back across the gym as he went. He didn't see Mrs. Case. "Am I in trouble?" "No, not really. Mrs. Case just texted me and said you shouldn't be at a club table if you're not participating in the activity. I asked the kids if I could sit there and read, and they said they didn't mind, and I didn't bother them. At least I don't think I did." Mr. Wilner said, "Why don't you go to the homework room? I know you can read in there." "Yeah, except Mrs. Case said that's only okay if it's homework reading. But I want to do my homework at home at night. Right now, I just want to read." "So you didn't spot a club you'd like to join?" Alex shook his head. "No." "Robotics is really fun. Do you like math and science?" Alex shook his head again. But he felt bad. The guy was trying hard to be friendly. He wanted to be friendly back, so Alex said, "But you put together a really nice bunch of clubs." Mr. Wilner smiled. "Thanks, but I didn't set them up. The kids pick out their own interest." As Alec heard that, what Mrs. Case had said earlier about starting a club clicked back into his brain. So, would it be hard to start a reading club? Not at all. Mr. Wilner reached over and pulled a piece of paper from a folder on his table and handed it to Alec. "That's a club application form. All you have to do is get one other kid to sign up with you, and you can start your own club." "Really?" said Alec. "Really." Alec took a quick look at the form. "This is great." Mr. Wilner got out his phone, opened a text window, and spoke the words out loud as he tapped. "Hi, Mrs. Case. I talked with Alex, and I'm helping him find a place in the club's program." He tapped the screen, and his phone made a swoosh sound. "There, now the director knows you're working with me." "Thanks," said Alec. Mr. Wilner's phone made a loud ding, a reply. He looked at the screen. "Mrs. Case says, good. Just be sure Alec knows that if he hasn't found an activity by 6 o'clock tomorrow, then I'll have to choose one for him." Mr. Wilner put his book back into his pocket. "So there it is. You've got till 6 o'clock tomorrow." Alec said, "But all I need is one other kid, right?" "Yes," Mr. Wilner said, "one other kid." He paused, then said, "However, the program director has final approval for any new clubs." "You mean Mrs. Case?" Alec asked. "That's right," he said, "Mrs. Case." And that's the end of chapter 5.